The Galactic Coalition's recruitment facility on Nexus Prime looked like someone had taken a luxury hotel and mated it with a maximum security prison. Which, Zane reflected as he lounged in the crystalline waiting chamber, wasn't too far from the truth. Before we begin, YouTube shows me that 93% of you haven't subscribed yet. Subscribing is free, it really supports our community, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that supposedly conveyed welcome and peace in 12 different languages, though to his human eyes they just looked like an alien having a seizure. Next candidate, please report to Chamber 9, announced the facility's AI in that sickeningly cheerful tone that made Zane want to punch something expensive. He watched as Kethmar glided forward, their crystalline form refracting the ambient light into rainbow cascades. The being moved with the grace of liquid mercury, each step creating tiny musical chimes that echoed through the chamber. Show off. Nervous, Zane called out, mostly because he was bored and the silence was getting oppressive. Kethmar's form shimmered, which Zane had learned was roughly equivalent to a polite smile. Nervousness is a biological construct. I experience only anticipation. Right. Well, good luck with that anticipation thing. The crystalline being flowed toward the testing chamber, leaving behind the faint scent of ozone and mineral springs. Zane stretched in his chair, a piece of furniture that had probably cost more than most planetary governments' annual budgets, but still couldn't figure out how to properly support a human spine. Administrator Nethys bustled past, her 6 arms juggling multiple data tablets while her compound eyes tracked at least 4 different conversations simultaneously. The Kahari were efficient multitaskers, which made them excellent administrators and absolutely terrible at small talk. "Human Zane," she chittered without looking up, "your psychological evaluation scores are concerning." "Thank you. I try. That was not a compliment." "I know." Nethys paused, 2 of her arms still working while the others gestured in what Zane had learned was the Kahari equivalent of exasperation. The Coalition has invested considerable resources in this selection process. Perhaps you could demonstrate some enthusiasm? Zane glanced around the waiting area at his fellow candidates. Besides Kethmar, there was Vorthak, a sentient gas cloud that had somehow managed to squeeze itself into a containment suit that made it look like a walking thunderstorm. The being pulsed with internal lightning, occasionally muttering what sounded like prayers in a language that made the air taste of copper and regret. Then there was Helixnos, whose insectoid form occupied what appeared to be a custom-built mobility chair. Her 4 arms worked constantly, either grooming her iridescent carapace or manipulating some kind of personal computing device that projected holographic equations into the air around her. She'd nodded politely when introduced, but hadn't spoken a word since arriving. "Look around, Nethys," Zane said, waving at the assembled group. "I'm sitting in a room with a living gemstone, a contained weather pattern, and something that looks like it crawled out of a nightmare about giant bugs. And you want enthusiasm? I showed up. That's about all the enthusiasm you're getting." The truth was, Zane needed the credits. The Coalition was offering enough payment for this mysterious, special assignment to clear his debts and maybe even buy his way off the mercenary circuit. He'd done worse things for less money, though admittedly not many of them had involved sitting in waiting rooms that smelled like sanitizer and alien perfume. A soft chime indicated that Kethmar had finished their evaluation. The crystalline being emerged from Chamber 9 moving differently, still graceful, but with a new weight to their steps. Their usually prismatic surface had dimmed slightly, like a gem viewed through frosted glass. "How'd it go?" Zane asked. "The scanner," Kethmar said slowly, "is unlike anything I have experienced. It does not merely observe, it understands." Before Zane could ask what that meant, Nethys's voice crackled over the intercom. "Vorthak, please report to Chamber 9. The gas cloud being rose from its specialized seating area, electrical discharges crackling more intensely around its containment suit. As it passed Kethmar, both beings exchanged what might have been meaningful looks, though it was hard to tell with a storm cloud and a living crystal. "Guardian of ancient wisdom," Kethmar murmured, so quietly Zane almost missed it. "What's that now?" The crystalline being's surface rippled. "The title the scanner assigned me. Guardian of ancient wisdom." They paused, their form brightening momentarily. "I had not known such a role existed." "Congratulations," Zane offered, though something about the way Kethmar said it made his skin crawl. There was a reverence there, almost religious, that set off every alarm bell his cynical mind possessed. Minutes passed. The facility's ambient sounds, the hum of life support systems, the distant murmur of administrative staff, the occasional announcement in languages that hurt human ears to hear, filled the silence. Finally, Vorthak emerged from the testing chamber. The gas being's containment suit now pulsed with different colors, deep purples and golds that hadn't been there before. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made the air vibrate. "Keeper of silent depths," it announced, and there was something like wonder in the electronic translation of its gaseous communication. "I am to be keeper of silent depths." Helixnos clicked her mandibles. Approval, curiosity, or hunger? Zane couldn't tell. The insectoid had remained motionless throughout the other evaluations, but now her forearms moved in complex patterns that might have been sign language or might have been ritual preparation. "Helixnos," Nethys called. "Chamber 9 is ready for you." The insectoid rose with mechanical precision, her movements suggesting both organic flexibility and engineered enhancement. As she passed the other candidates, she finally spoke, her voice a layered harmony of clicks and whistles that the universal translators struggled to process. "It senses what we truly are," she said, the words carrying undertones that made Zane's teeth ache. "What we were always meant to become. Great. Cosmic destiny." Zane's favorite. He was starting to suspect this wasn't just a job interview. Helixnos disappeared into Chamber 9, leaving Zane alone with two beings who'd apparently just had religious experiences courtesy of an alien scanning device. The waiting chamber felt larger now, the bioluminescent walls pulsing in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. "So," Zane said to break the silence, "anyone want to explain what this scanner thing actually does?" Because the job posting was pretty vague on details. Kethmar's form shimmered with what might have been amusement. "You did not research the position before applying?" "I researched the payment. Everything else was classified." The scanner, Vorthak intoned, its voice now carrying those strange harmonics, reads the fundamental essence of a being. It perceives not what you are, but what you are capable of becoming. Sounds like fortune-telling with extra steps. "Mock, if you wish," the gas being replied, "but the scanner has never been wrong. For 3,000 cycles, it has identified those meant for the Coalition's most sacred duties." Sacred duties. Zane was liking this less by the minute. In his experience, when powerful organizations started talking about sacred anything, regular people ended up dead. The chamber door opened again, and Helixnos emerged. Her entire carapace now gleamed with an inner light that definitely hadn't been there before, and her movements carried a fluid grace that seemed to defy her insectoid physiology. "Weaver of distant threads," she announced, her voice now carrying musical undertones that made the universal translator sound almost poetic. "I am to be weaver of distant threads. 3 for 3. Each candidate had received some mystical-sounding title that appeared to fill them with cosmic purpose and absolutely zero useful information. Zane was starting to feel like the punchline to a joke he didn't understand. "Zane," Nethys called over the intercom, "Chamber 9 is ready for you." He stood, stretching muscles that had stiffened during the wait. "Wish me luck, folks. Try not to achieve enlightenment while I'm gone." The other candidates watched him walk toward Chamber 9 with expressions, or the alien equivalent, that suggested they were witnessing something significant, which, considering how this day was going, probably wasn't a good sign. Chamber 9 was smaller than he'd expected, its walls lined with technology that looked like it predated human spaceflight by several geological ages. The scanner itself dominated the center of the room, a crystalline structure about the size of a small building that seemed to bend light around itself in physically impossible ways. "Please stand in the designated area," instructed a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. Zane stepped onto the platform, noting the worn spots where countless beings had stood before him. The scanner hummed to life, its crystalline surface beginning to glow with patterns that hurt to look at directly. Then it stopped. Not slowed down, not dimmed. Stopped completely, as if someone had pulled its power cord. The sudden silence was so complete that Zane could hear his own heartbeat. He said to the empty chamber. "Is that supposed to happen?" The scanner flickered once, twice, then blazed to life with such intensity that Zane had to shield his eyes. Symbols he didn't recognize scrolled across its surface in rapid succession, each one pulsing with urgent energy. Error messages in a dozen different scripts appeared and vanished before he could read them. "Administrator Nethys to Chamber 9 immediately," announced the facility AI, its cheerful tone replaced by something approaching panic. "Technical team to Chamber 9. Priority Alpha." The scanner's humming rose to a shriek that made Zane's bones vibrate. He tried to step off the platform, but found himself frozen in place. Not physically restrained, but held by something that felt like the weight of cosmic attention. "Well," he muttered through gritted teeth, "this is new." The chamber door burst open, admitting Nethys and a swarm of technicians whose species Zane didn't recognize. They swarmed around the scanner with instruments and urgent chittering, their movements suggesting the kind of panic usually reserved for critical reactor failures. "Shut it down," Nethys ordered, her multiple arms working frantically at different control panels. "We're trying," replied one of the technicians, a being that looked like a cross between an octopus and a computer terminal. "It's not responding to any shutdown commands." The scanner's shriek reached a crescendo, then cut off abruptly. In the sudden silence, symbols continued to scroll across its surface, but now they moved slowly, deliberately, like a message being carefully composed. Then words appeared, not in any alien script, but in clean, simple English. "Scanning. Scanning. Error. Classification impossible. Accessing deep archives. Accessing restricted databases. Warning. Subject classification beyond standard parameters." "That's not good," Zane observed. The scanner pulsed once more, and new text appeared. "Classification complete. Warden of the Flame beyond law." The chamber fell silent. Even the technicians stopped their frantic activity, staring at the scanner's display with expressions that suggested they were witnessing something between a miracle and a catastrophe. "That," whispered Nethys, her compound eyes reflecting the scanner's glow, is impossible. That classification was retired centuries ago. The position doesn't exist. The scanner flickered, and one final message appeared. It does now. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Zane remained frozen on the platform, wondering if this was how his mercenary career would end. Not in a blaze of gunfire or a spectacular explosion, but standing in a room full of panicked aliens while an ancient machine had what appeared to be a cosmic nervous breakdown. Did it just say, "Warden of the Flame Beyond Law"? He asked, though the words felt strange in his mouth, like he was speaking a language he'd forgotten he knew. Nethys's 6 arms had gone completely still, something Zane had never seen before. The Kahari administrator stared at the scanner's display with the kind of expression usually reserved for witnessing the heat death of the universe. "Impossible," she whispered. The wardenship was dissolved after the Cataclysm Wars. The position was deemed too dangerous to exist. "Well, apparently someone forgot to tell your fancy crystal ball here." The lead technician, whose species appeared to be part mollusk and part supercomputer, extended several tentacles toward the scanner's control interface. "Administrator, we should evacuate the facility. If the scanner is malfunctioning this severely—" "It's not malfunctioning," interrupted a new voice. Everyone turned toward the chamber entrance, where the 3 previously evaluated candidates now stood. But something was different about them. Kethmar's crystalline form pulsed with internal light that cast rainbow patterns on the walls. Vorthak's contained storm had intensified, crackling with energies that made the air taste of lightning and ozone. Helixnos moved with predatory grace, her insectoid features somehow more pronounced, more alien than before. "The scanner never malfunctions," Kethmar continued, their voice now carrying harmonics that resonated in Zane's chest. "It simply reveals truth." "What truth?" Zane demanded, finally able to step off the platform as the scanner's hold on him released. "And why do you 3 suddenly look like you're auditioning for a cosmic horror movie?" Helixnos clicked her mandibles in what might have been amusement. "Because we are no longer pretending to be something we are not." The scanner pulsed again, and holographic images began manifesting around the chamber. Zane found himself surrounded by scenes of cosmic destruction, stars being snuffed out like candles, entire sectors of space folding in on themselves, galaxies spinning apart into component atoms. "The Devourers," Vorthak intoned, his electronic voice now carrying undertones that made the universal translator sound like it was crying. "They return." "The who now?" Nethys had gone pale, an impressive feat for a being with green chitinous skin. "The Devourers are myth, legend, stories told to frighten young civilizations." "No," said a new voice, ancient and tired and speaking from the scanner itself. "We are quite real and quite patient and quite hungry." The holographic images shifted, showing what looked like tears in the fabric of space itself. Through these rifts, Zane caught glimpses of something that made his brain hurt to process. Shapes that existed in too many dimensions, entities that seemed to be made of the absence of existence itself. "Who are you?" he asked the scanner, though part of him already suspected the answer wouldn't improve his day. "I am what remains of the Veltar Collective. We who came before. We who failed." The ancient voice carried weight that seemed to press against Zane's consciousness. "We built this warning system before our civilization fell. A final gift to those who would come after." The holographic display shifted again, showing a galaxy-spanning civilization at its height. Beings of pure thought manipulating matter at the quantum level. Worlds reshaped according to artistic vision. Stars arranged in patterns that served as both beauty and function. We thought ourselves beyond such primitive concerns as survival. The voice continued. We were wrong. The images changed, showing the same glorious civilization being consumed by entities that seemed to exist in the spaces between atoms. Worlds didn't explode. They simply stopped being, as if reality itself forgot they had ever existed. The devourers feed on existence itself, the scanner explained. They consume not just matter and energy, but the very concept of being. When they finish with a reality, it becomes as if it never was. Cheerful, Zane muttered. And I'm supposed to fight these things? With what? Harsh language and a bad attitude? You are supposed to wield the flame, Kethmar said, their crystalline form now pulsing in rhythm with the scanner. As the last Warden did, before he vanished. What flame? I don't see any flame. The scanner's holographic display shifted to show what appeared to be a human figure standing against a tide of cosmic darkness. But this human blazed with an inner fire that seemed to burn away the very concept of void and entropy. The flame beyond law, the ancient voice explained, a force that exists outside the normal rules of reality. It cannot be contained, controlled, or predicted. It simply is, and it burns away that which seeks to make things not be. Sounds like a cosmic flamethrower. Where do I pick it up? You do not pick it up, Helix Nos said, her musical voice now carrying undertones of something that might have been hunger. It picks you. And it already has. Zane felt a strange tingling sensation, starting in his chest and spreading outward. The sensation wasn't entirely unpleasant, but it carried an intensity that suggested it could become very unpleasant very quickly. When did this happen exactly? Because I'm pretty sure I'd remember being chosen by cosmic forces. The scanner's display showed a derelict ship floating in deep space, its hull scored by weapons fire and radiation burns. Zane recognized it immediately. The salvage job that had gone sideways 3 years ago, when his team had stumbled across technology that shouldn't have existed. The Veltar emergency beacon, the ancient voice said. You were exposed to its activation pulse. The flame recognized a suitable host and began the bonding process. Bonding process? Zane didn't like the sound of that. What kind of bonding process? The kind that changes you at a fundamental level, Kethmar replied. The kind that makes you capable of wielding forces that could remake or unmake reality itself. The kind, Vorthak added, his storm form crackling with increased intensity, that makes you incredibly dangerous. And the kind, Helix Nos finished, that we are sworn to prevent. The three beings moved with sudden, coordinated precision. Kethmar's crystalline form began to resonate at frequencies that made the chamber walls crack. Vorthak's contained storm expanded, filling half the room with electrical discharge. Helixinos leaped from wall to ceiling to floor with impossible agility, her 4 arms now holding weapons that definitely hadn't been there moments before. Wait! What? Zane backed against the scanner, which was now humming with protective energy. I thought we were all on the same team here. We are the Guardians, Kethmar explained, their voice now carrying the weight of absolute certainty. We have waited lifetimes for a potential Warden to emerge. Our sacred duty is to evaluate whether they can be trusted with such power. Evaluation by combat, Helix Nos added, her weapons charging with energy that made the air shimmer. If you survive, you may be worthy. If not, the galaxy remains safe from the possibility of another Warden going insane with power, Vorthak concluded. That's reassuring, Zane said, then threw himself sideways as Helix Nose opened fire. The chamber erupted into chaos. Energy bolts seared the air where Zane had been standing, while Kethmar's resonance frequencies shattered several pieces of expensive-looking equipment. Vorthak's electrical discharge earthed itself through the metal walls, causing sparks to cascade from damaged systems. Nethys and her technicians had wisely decided that discretion was the better part of not being vaporized, and were scrambling for the exit with commendable speed. "This is not standard recruitment protocol," Nethys shouted over the sound of destruction. "No," agreed the scanner's ancient voice, "but it is necessary. The flame must be tested, and time grows short." Zane rolled behind a bank of monitoring equipment as another volley of energy bolts turned his previous position into molten metal. The tingling sensation in his chest was growing stronger, and he was starting to see patterns in the chaos around him, trajectories that hadn't been fired yet, movements his attackers hadn't made. "Anytime you want to activate Cosmic Flame Thing," he shouted at his own chest. Really not picky about the timing here. Helix Nose landed on the equipment bank above him, all 4 weapons trained on his position. The flame responds to need, not want. If you are worthy, it will come. And if I'm not, then you die, and the galaxy is spared another potential catastrophe. She opened fire, and Zane discovered that when faced with imminent death, the flame had very definite opinions about self-preservation. The world exploded into light. The light wasn't just bright, it was aggressive. It burst from Zane's chest like a solar flare having a temper tantrum, washing over the chamber in waves that made reality hiccup. For a moment, everything existed in too many dimensions at once, and Zane caught glimpses of the universe as it really was. Not the comfortable 3-dimensional space his brain preferred, but something vast and interconnected and absolutely terrifying in its scope. Then the light faded, leaving him standing in a chamber that looked like it had been redecorated by a cosmic interior designer with anger management issues. The monitoring equipment was now abstract art. The walls bore scorch marks in patterns that suggested mathematical equations written in flame. And his 3 attackers had been thrown against the far wall with enough force to leave impressions in the reinforced metal. "Well," Zane said, looking down at his hands, which were still flickering with residual energy. "That was new." Kethmar extracted themselves from their wall-shaped dent. Their crystalline form now shot through with cracks that pulsed with inner light. "Impressive, but raw power alone does not make a Warden." "Good thing I'm not just raw power then," Zane replied, then paused. "Wait, did I just say that?" That didn't sound like me. The scanner's ancient voice carried what might have been amusement. "The flame carries memory, human. Knowledge of those who wielded it before. You are beginning to access their experiences." Helix Nose peeled herself off the wall with mechanical precision, her weapons recharging with a whine that suggested they'd been upgraded during the brief intermission. "Memory without wisdom is merely information. Let us see if you can learn." She opened fire again, but this time Zane didn't just dodge. He moved through space in ways that shouldn't have been possible, stepping between the energy bolts as if they were standing still. The knowledge wasn't his, but it felt natural, like remembering how to ride a bicycle after years of walking. "The flame doesn't just burn," he said, and his voice carried harmonics that made the air shimmer. "It reveals, shows truth. And the truth is, you 3 aren't really trying to kill me." Vorthak's storm form crackled with increased intensity. electrical discharges earthing themselves through the damaged walls. Perception. But can you perceive why? Zane reached out with senses he hadn't known he possessed, feeling the currents of intention that flowed around the three beings. What he found was complicated. "You're not guardians," he said slowly. "Not really. You're refugees." The attacks stopped. Kethmar's resonance frequencies faded to silence. Helixnos lowered her weapons. Even Vorthak's contained storm seemed to calm, the electrical discharges becoming more rhythmic, less chaotic. "Explain," Kethmar said, their crystalline form dimming to its normal rainbow refraction. "The scanner didn't give you titles. It revealed what you'd lost." Zane felt the knowledge flowing through him, carried on currents of flame that existed outside normal space. "Guardian of ancient wisdom, because your civilization's knowledge was devoured. Keeper of silent depths, because your people's voices were silenced. Weaver of distant threads, because the connections between your worlds were severed." Helixnos clicked her mandibles softly. "The human understands more than we anticipated." "I understand your survivors," Zane said. "The last of your kinds. And you've been waiting here, at the edge of Devourer territory, hoping someone would come along who could actually fight them. Hope," Vorthak intoned, "is a dangerous emotion when one has seen entire realities consumed." The scanner's holographic display shifted, showing star maps that mark the slow but inexorable advance of void zones, areas where space itself had been consumed, leaving behind regions of absolute nothingness. The pattern was clear. The Devourers were moving through the galaxy like a slow plague, erasing everything in their path. "How long?" Zane asked. "At current rates of consumption," the ancient voice replied, "this sector will begin experiencing incursions within 50 standard cycles. Full dissolution within 200. That's not very long. For a galaxy, it is the blink of an eye. For individuals," the voice trailed off. "For individuals, it is long enough to live full lives, have children, see them grow old and die, and never personally face the void. Which is why most civilizations choose to ignore the problem," Helixnos added. "It is easier to believe the threat will not reach them in their lifetime." Zane felt something burning in his chest that had nothing to do with cosmic forces. "That's the most pathetic thing I've ever heard. And I've heard politicians explain tax policy." "Humans," observed Kethmar, "have an unusual relationship with long-term consequences." "Humans," Zane corrected, "have an unusual relationship with being told something can't be done." He turned to face the scanner directly. "You said there was a previous Warden. What happened to him?" The holographic display showed a figure much like the one Zane had seen before. Human, burning with inner fire, standing against cosmic darkness. But this time, the image continued, showing the figure growing brighter and brighter until the light itself became destructive, consuming stars and worlds in its attempt to burn away the void. "Madness," the ancient voice explained. "The flame's power is limited only by the wielder's will and imagination. When faced with an enemy that devours existence itself, the temptation is to burn everything in order to leave nothing for them to consume. So the last Warden went crazy with power and had to be stopped." "The last Warden," Vorthak said quietly, "realized what he was becoming and stopped himself. He walked into the void alone, taking the flame with him, hoping his sacrifice would buy the galaxy time. Did it work? For a while. The Devourer's advance slowed, but they have learned to adapt, to consume more efficiently. And now they return, stronger than before." Zane stared at the holographic star map, watching the slow spread of void zones eating away at the galaxy's edge. The scale was almost incomprehensible. Entire civilizations reduced to nothing, billions of lives simply ceasing to exist. Not just killed, but made to never have been. "This is insane," he said. "One person can't fight something like this. It's like trying to stop entropy with a garden hose." "Yes," agreed Kethmar, "it is impossible, which is why it requires someone foolish enough to try anyway." "Humans," Helix Nos added, "have a reputation for attempting impossible things. Sometimes," Vorthak concluded, "they even succeed." Zane felt the flame pulsing in his chest, responding to his emotions. The sensation was intoxicating, raw power that could reshape reality according to his will. He could see how easy it would be to lose oneself in that kind of capability. "What makes you think I won't go crazy like the last guy?" The three survivors exchanged glances, or the alien equivalent. Finally, Kethmar spoke. "Because the last Warden was alone. He carried the burden of entire civilizations on his shoulders, with no one who could understand the weight of cosmic responsibility." Their crystalline form brightened. "You will not be alone." "The three of us," Helix Sinos said, "have been waiting for centuries. Waiting for a new Warden to emerge. Not to test you for worthiness, but to ensure you have support when the power threatens to consume you." "Accountability," Vorthak added. "Someone to remind you that the goal is not to burn everything, but to preserve what can be preserved." The chamber's damaged systems chose that moment to emit a warning klaxon that sounded like a mechanical whale having an anxiety attack. Emergency lighting bathed everything in crimson, while the facility's AI announced in its cheerfully frantic voice, "Hull breach detected. Containment failure in sectors 12 through 18. All personnel to emergency stations." That, observed the scanner's ancient voice, would be the Devourer scout probe. Scout probe? Zane felt the flame respond to his spike of adrenaline, energy crackling around his hands. "You mean they're here?" "Now." The holographic display shifted to show the exterior of Nexus Prime Station. Something was attached to the hull. Not a ship exactly, but a void-shaped wrong thing that hurt to look at directly. Where it touched the station, metal and ceramic and living tissue simply ceased to exist, leaving behind gaps in reality that made Zane's eyes water. "The Devourers send scouts ahead of their main forces," Helix Sinos explained, her weapons powering up again. "They probe for resistance, test local defenses, identify potential threats." "Threats like Wardens," Kethmar added. "So this is my job interview?" Zane asked. "Fight a cosmic horror that eats reality?" "Think of it," Vorthak suggested, "as a practical examination." The station shuddered as another section of hull simply vanished. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the facility, but Zane could see from the scanner's display that the void thing was eating through them as fast as they deployed. "Right then," he said, feeling the flame surge in response to his determination. "Let's go save some reality." The ancient voice from the scanner carried something that might have been pride. "Remember, Warden, the flame burns brightest when it burns for others, not for itself." "Warden," Zane repeated, testing the title. It felt strange, but somehow right, like a coat that was slightly too large, but would grow to fit with time. "I guess I can live with that." He started toward the chamber door, then paused. "One question, though. If this thing eats existence itself, how exactly am I supposed to fight it?" Helix Nos's mandibles clicked in what was definitely amusement. "The same way humans fight everything else? with violence, stubbornness, and absolutely no regard for the impossibility of success. "That," Zane said, grinning as the flame blazed brighter in his chest, "I can work with." The corridor leading to the station's outer hull looked like someone had decided to redecorate using existential dread as a theme. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, while the walls bore stress fractures that seemed to spell out warnings in languages that predated most civilizations. The station's AI had given up on its cheerful announcements and was now simply playing funeral dirges in 12 different musical traditions. "Remind me again why we're running toward the cosmic horror instead of away from it," Zane asked as their makeshift group navigated around a section of corridor that had temporarily decided not to exist. "Because," Helixnos replied, her forearms holding weapons that hummed with enough energy to power a small moon, "running away is merely postponing the inevitable. The Devourers do not tire, do not retreat, and do not forget." "Plus," added Kethmar, their crystalline form refracting the emergency lighting into ominous rainbow patterns, "you are now a beacon for their attention. The Flame's activation has announced your presence to every Devourer entity within 100 light years. Wonderful. So I'm cosmic bait." "You are the Warden," Vorthak corrected, his contained storm crackling with increasing intensity as they approached the outer sections. "You are the fire that burns in the darkness. Whether that fire illuminates or incinerates depends entirely on your choices." They reached the final security checkpoint before the compromised hull sections. Through the reinforced transparasteel viewport, Zane got his first clear look at their enemy. The scout probe defied easy description. It existed in too many dimensions simultaneously, appearing as a writhing mass of void stuff that seemed to eat light itself. Where it touched the station's hull, reality simply stopped. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but edited out of existence with surgical precision. "It's smaller than I expected," Zane observed. "This is merely a fingertip," Helixnos explained. "The actual entity exists primarily in dimensional spaces we cannot perceive. What we see is the part that intersects with our reality." "Like a shark fin breaking the surface of an ocean," Kethmar added. "The true danger lies beneath." The station shuddered again, and another section of hull vanished. Through the gap, Zane could see stars winking out one by one as the scout probe's influence spread. It wasn't just consuming the station, it was beginning to edit this entire region of space out of existence. "How do I fight something I can't properly see?" "The same way you fight anything else," came the scanner's ancient voice through their communication devices. "You hit it until it stops moving. That's your cosmic wisdom? Hit it until it stops?" "Sometimes," the voice replied, with what might have been amusement. "The simplest solutions are the most effective. The flame burns through dimensional barriers. What the probe hides in folded space, the fire can reach." Zane felt the power building in his chest, responding to his determination and the proximity of genuine threat. The sensation was intoxicating, like being connected to the fundamental forces that held reality together. He could feel the probe's alien presence pressing against local space-time, could sense the wrongness of its existence like a discordant note in an otherwise harmonious symphony. "All right," he said, moving toward the sealed blast door that led to the compromised section. "Let's see what this cosmic flamethrower can actually do." "Wait," Vorthak said, his electronic voice carrying urgent harmonics. "Remember what happened to the last Warden. The temptation will be to use all the power available to you, to burn away not just the threat, but everything around it to ensure nothing remains for the Devourers to consume." The flame responds to will and intent, Kethmar added. If you approach this with thoughts of total destruction, that is what you will become. So, what should I be thinking about? Helixenos' mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Think about preservation. About the beings on this station who are counting on survival. About the civilizations beyond who do not yet know the void approaches. Think, suggested the scanner's voice, about being the kind of fire that lights candles, not the kind that burns down forests. Zane took a deep breath, feeling the flame pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Right. Controlled burn. Not cosmic barbecue. Got it. The blast door cycled open, revealing a section of corridor that existed in a state of quantum uncertainty. Parts of the walls flickered between solid matter and absolute void, while the floor beneath their feet felt stable one moment and insubstantial the next. The scout probe's influence was stronger here, pressing against their minds with alien geometries that made rational thought difficult. It's trying to edit us out of existence, Zane observed, noting how his own hands seemed to flicker in and out of focus. Resist, Vorthek advised. Assert your existence. Declare your right to be. I exist, Zane said firmly, and felt the flame surge in response. His form solidified, becoming more real than the shifting environment around him. I am. I burn. And you, he addressed the probe directly, are trespassing in my reality. The void thing's attention turned toward him with the weight of cosmic hunger. For a moment, Zane felt himself being evaluated by an intelligence so vast and alien that his mind couldn't properly process it. Then the probe struck, not with physical force, but with the simple assertion that he had never existed. The attack was subtle and absolute. One moment, Zane was standing in a damaged corridor. The next, he was fighting for the very concept of his own existence. The probe wasn't trying to kill him. It was trying to make him never have been, to edit his presence out of the timeline itself. Stubborn human trick number 1, Zane muttered through gritted teeth, feeling the flame blaze in response to his defiance. When reality says you don't exist, say, watch me, and exist harder. He pushed back against the void's assertion, not with force, but with simple, bloody-minded persistence. The flame wrapped around him like armor made of condensed starlight, burning away the probe's attempts to unwrite his existence. Each wave of cosmic erasure met an equally stubborn wave of cosmic, no, actually, I'm still here. The probe's attention shifted, recognizing a genuine threat. The part of it that existed in normal space began to expand, reality warping around its presence as more of the entity forced itself into their dimension. The station groaned under forces that weren't quite physical, and warning klaxons began sounding throughout the facility. It's calling for reinforcements, Helixenos warned, her weapons tracking movements that existed in too many dimensions to properly target. How long before they arrive? Zane asked, advancing on the probe with flames dancing around his hands. Minutes, Kethmar replied. Perhaps less. Then I guess I'd better work fast. The probe lashed out with tendrils of void stuff that sought to unravel him at the molecular level. Zane met them with streams of flame that burned not just matter, but the spaces between atoms, the quantum foam that underlied reality itself. Where fire met void, existence reasserted itself with violent enthusiasm. But the probe was learning, adapting its attacks to match his responses. Each exchange taught it more about how the flame worked, how to counter its reality-affirming properties. Zane could feel the entity's vast intelligence processing his fighting style, preparing counters for every technique he used. It's studying me, he realized. Then stop being predictable, Vorthak suggested. Right. Time for stubborn human trick number 2. When the enemy expects tactical brilliance, hit them with weapons-grade stupidity. Instead of fighting the probe's dimensional attacks with careful applications of flame, Zane did something that violated several fundamental laws of physics and at least 3 conventions of cosmic warfare. He grabbed the probe's main tendril with his bare hands. The contact was like touching the event horizon of a black hole while being struck by lightning made of pure entropy. Every nerve in his body screamed warnings that he was dissolving at the subatomic level. But the flame responded to his desperate gambit, flowing through the point of contact and into the probe itself. The entity recoiled, its alien intelligence suddenly flooded with something it had never encountered before. Human stubbornness rendered as cosmic force. The flame didn't just burn the probe, it infected it with the absolute conviction that reality was worth preserving, that existence had value beyond mere consumption. For a moment, the scout probe hesitated. In that instant of uncertainty, Zane poured everything he had into a single, focused thought. You don't belong here. Go home. The probe left. Not destroyed, not defeated, but convinced that this particular reality wasn't worth the effort required to consume it. It folded itself back through dimensional barriers, carrying with it a new understanding that some fires burned too bright to extinguish. The damaged sections of the station solidified, reality reasserting itself with almost audible relief. Emergency lighting shifted from hellish red to cautious amber, and the AI resumed its cheerful announcements about hull integrity and life support functionality. That, Zane said, swaying slightly as the flame's intensity diminished, was deeply weird. You convinced it to leave, Kethmar observed, their crystalline form brightening with what might have been admiration. I have never seen a devourer entity simply decide not to consume. Humans, Helixanos noted, have a talent for making the impossible seem merely improbable. So what happens now? Zane asked. Do I get a cosmic badge? A reality-defending license? Dental benefits? Now, said the scanner's ancient voice, you become what you were always meant to be, the Warden of the Flame Beyond Law, guardian of existence itself. And us? Vorthak asked. You become his counsel, his anchors to sanity, his reminder that the goal is not to burn everything, but to preserve what matters. Zane looked around at his unlikely companions, refugees from cosmic horror who had chosen to stand guard against the dark. It wasn't the career path he'd planned, but then again, the best jobs were usually the ones you never saw coming. Warden of the Flame Beyond Law, he said, testing the title again. I suppose there are worse ways to spend eternity. Indeed, agreed Kethmar. You could be extinct. Good point. All right then, Team Cosmic Fire Safety. What's our next move? The scanner's display lit up with star charts showing the Devourer's slow advance across the galaxy. There was work to do, realities to preserve, and impossible odds to defy through sheer bloody-minded determination. Zane grinned, feeling the flame pulse steadily in his chest like a second heartbeat. Let's go save a galaxy. After all, someone had to. And it might as well be the species too stupid to know when they were beaten.